Hello everyone, welcome back to the Flicks Files. When I think of the 1980s in terms of a decade of movies and me being a teenager during that period, quite a lot of movie memories that I have revolve around a particular director. And that's the director that we're going to be talking about in this video. 5 movies in particular. He did a few more films than what I have. But for one reason or another, I don't actually have them in my collection. But the ones I do have are what I consider to be his best work. And that director is Joe Dante. Now, Joe Dante was an alumni of the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. Roger Corman was particularly famous for doing low-budget movies in various genres and, having various degrees of success. And it was from there that Joe Dante started. And I believe his very first movie was a cheapo horror flick called Piranha that actually did quite well in terms of revenue against budget. And from there, he did a movie called The Howling, which I know has a great following amongst the horror fans out there. And I'm very, very sad to say that I haven't actually seen that movie as yet. Of that period, the kind of werewolf movie that I gravitated towards was An American Werewolf in London. And so the Howling kind of passed me by as a werewolf movie. But I do intend to see it one day. So yeah, it's on my list of movies to see. So what I'm going to do, as I say, there's only 5 Blu-rays. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly and do a little bit of a chat about each one. As I've said in previous videos, I love all of these films. So I'm sure further down the line as my channel ages, and hopefully as I get more viewers, I probably will do more of a deep dive on each of these films individually. So this is more of an overview of which Joe Dante films I have in my collection. So I'm going to kind of do them chronologically, and hopefully I'll get the order right this time. So I'm going to start with the very first kind of big film that Joe Dante did. And for Joe Dante, it's kind of a bittersweet film because this was the most successful film he ever ended up directing. So he kind of, hit it out the park with this movie. And with subsequent movies, although they were, just as well made and in some instances much better films, they never quite, connected with the audience for one reason or another and were never quite as successful. So the first movie I'm going to talk about is 1984's Gremlins. And this was a massive movie on the year that it came out. I think this and Ghostbusters were the 2 films of that year that I remember everybody talking about. Have you seen Ghostbusters? Have you seen Gremlins? And certainly when it came out on video, it was hugely successful. I know I've said this before, but it was another one of those movies where you'd go into your local video shop and it was just never on the shelf. They'd have like 3 copies and you could just never get a hold of them for weeks after it was released. So Gremlins. I'm sure you've all seen it. I'll give a very, very brief overview. So it's about a young chap called Billy Peltzer. That's the other thing that you'll find with Joe Dante movies. The characters tend to have really, really great names. And Billy Peltzer, his father, is an inventor, and he makes silly things that don't sell very well. I think the most famous thing in it is he has a device called the bathroom buddy, which is like a little plastic thing that folds. It's like a Swiss Army knife of a bathroom. So it has like a toothbrush and shaving cream and a little razor. And he comes up with these silly inventions that never take off. But the movie starts where he visits an old shop in Chinatown, I believe it is. And he buys a creature from like a mystic salesman. And it turns out to be a creature called a mogwai, which looks really, really cute. But there are certain rules that you have to follow. And those rules are: you have to keep it out of direct sunlight. You can't feed it after midnight, and you have to keep it away from water. And basically what happens is, I think Mogwai ends up eating without Billy realizing, and then water gets spilt on Gizmo, which is the name that he gives this Mogwai, and it produces offspring which turn out to be gremlins. And the reason they come out as gremlins is, I think, because the water that gets spilt on him is dirty water. So, the creatures that spawn off him end up being like evil little buggers that just wreak havoc everywhere. Anyway, that's kind of a potted overview, but it is just like a creature flick. And the fun really starts when the gremlins appear and they're wreaking havoc in this small town. And from then on, it's about Billy and his girlfriend and various residents and how they deal with this infestation of gremlins. And as I say, it was Joe Dante's most successful movie. And I think it's a movie that everybody's seen that they like. I've never met anybody that doesn't like Gremlins. And I know there's been talk of a remake for a long time now. And in a way, it would be nice for it to happen, but then I worry what it would be like, whether they would keep the Gremlins as the puppets that they are. But more than not, they will probably all be CGI. And that would probably take away a lot of the charm. So in a way, I kind of hope Gremlins 3 never really happens. So from there, the very next year in 1985, we have Explorers. Now, this is a movie that's very close to my heart because I didn't really know anything about it until, we rented it from our video shop. And when I watched it, I just thought, oh, what a lovely movie. As a sci-fi geek in the 80s, it was like a real love letter. And the basic plot of that is there are 3 kids. 2 of them are quite famous actors as they got older. One of them is the late River Phoenix. And then this is Ethan Hawke's first movie. And I'm the same age as Ethan Hawke. So when I see how young he was in this movie, it kind of reminds me how young I would have been when I first saw it. And they start having dreams. And in these dreams, they are dreaming of circuit boards and wiring diagrams. And River Phoenix is kind of like the genius of the 3. And he interprets these dreams and they manage to sketch out what they remember. And it's all a bit of a flight of fancy, and you do have to leave your brain at the door. But the upshot of it is that they end up building a device that creates a sphere that they can control using a computer. And they can move this like little ball of force field around. And they get the idea that if they make the sphere larger, which they're able to do, they can get something to put inside the sphere, sit inside it, and then they can travel around inside this hard bubble, for want of a better term. And in doing so, they end up traveling into space. And there they meet up with these 2 aliens, like a boy and a girl alien. And they find out that it's the aliens that have been giving them these dreams to encourage them to build this craft so they can meet. And it's a lovely film. If I was to be critical, if I had my critical hat on, I would say that it does kind of drop the ball a little bit at the end. I think the build-up is so great that when they meet the aliens, as nice as they are, it's never quite as exciting as you want it to be. So the ending is a little bit of a letdown. But it's still a movie that I enjoyed as a teenager, and it holds a great place in my heart. And I'm glad to have it in my collection. So the next movie after that is possibly the biggest movie that Joe Dante directed. And it's a movie that should have been a blockbuster. There's nothing intrinsically bad about this movie. And it's called Inner Space. And if you've not seen Inner Space, I really, really encourage you to go out and get a copy from somewhere or rent it from iTunes if it's available and give it a watch, because it is a really good action comedy science fiction film from the mid to late 80s. It's got industrial effects, special effects by Industrial Light and Magic, as did Explorers. So it's got, of its time, top-notch visual effects. And it's about a an astronaut, again, great name, called, now then, Tuck Pendleton. Astronaut Tuck Pendleton, as played by Dennis Quaid. And what happens is he is miniaturized inside a vessel that's not a million miles away from the vessel that the three kids construct in Explorers, but he's in like a ball-shaped craft, and he gets miniaturized as part of an experiment and put inside a syringe. And I think the idea is he's going to be injected inside a rabbit, and then it would move into like a Fantastic Voyage kind of movie where he traverses the inner workings of this rabbit. But instead, the plot takes on a different turn, where the scientist, for reasons I won't bother explaining, ends up injecting Tuck Pendleton, miniaturized, into the ass of Martin Short, who is he works in Safeway supermarket as a cashier. So he's kind of a, I mean, I don't want to degrade people that work those kind of jobs, but I think in the movie that they selected that to say that this guy is like just an average everyman. There's nothing special about his life. But suddenly he gets this miniaturized astronaut injected into his body. And so Dennis Quaid is traversing around his heart, and when he goes up to his inner ear and manages to attach a device to Martin Short's eardrum so he can communicate with him. So to begin with, Martin Short thinks he's possessed because he's hearing this voice coming from within. And together, they start to work together to try and help Dennis Quaid and basically get him out of Martin Short's body before he runs out of oxygen. And that's the basic premise. And I think and I saw this at the cinema. I remember going to see this at the cinema with my friend in 1987, and there being like 5 people in the cinema. And from what I've read, the reason it tanked so badly was the marketing campaign, in that the studio didn't quite know how to sell it as a picture. And the poster, which I've already put up, but I'll quickly put it up again, is just like a big thumb and a finger with a very miniaturized figure in between them. And I guess if you was to just glance at that poster, it'd be difficult to work out, what the movie was. But it's just a cracking movie. There's some very good action in it. There's some very clever ideas. Martin Short is just hilariously funny, trying to cope with this person inside his body, doing various things with his body. And Meg Ryan is in it as like the love interest. And yeah, it's a great film. And it's a damn shame it didn't do better at the box office, because Joe Dante does everything right as a director. And it's a very tight, exciting movie to watch. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go and see it. You'll thank me. So the next film in my Joe Dante collection is 1989's The Burbs. I always think this is probably one of the last of the Tom Hanks light-hearted comedy movies that he did before he did Philadelphia, I think it was, and started to move more into the serious roles. And again, this is such a fun movie. And the basic idea is Tom Hanks is a guy living on a small suburb, and he's friendly with all the neighbors around him. And he wants to take a vacation from work, but he wants to stay at home. He just wants time, by himself to relax and do things around the house. And while he has all this free time on his hands, he starts to doubt what's happening with their new neighbors, because a family move in that are very secretive and they keep themselves to themselves. And then him and his neighbor, played by an actor, oh gosh, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Oh, Bruce Dern, who's kind of an ex-army guy and very military. And another guy in the suburb get together, and the three of them try and work out what the crack is with his family. And they start to think that, something evil is happening inside this neighbor's house, and they need to get to the bottom of what they're doing. And Carrie Fisher plays Tom Hanks' wife, and, it's really nice to see her in the movie. And again, it's just a really good film, and there's some really good, funny moments in it. And I will definitely be doing a deep dive video about that film, so I'm not going to go into it too much. Suffice to say that again, Joe Dante didn't drop the ball with that movie. And it deserved to be more successful than it was. So the next movie I have is Gremlins 2. And I bought this as a double pack Blu-ray. I wanted them both, and I wanted to buy them separately, but the only copy I could find was to buy them together in this box set, which is fine. And Gremlins 2, I think it was released in 1990. And it was kind of Joe Dante just absolutely going berserk. I've heard Quentin Tarantino describe this film as a live-action Mad magazine, which is a very good description for it. It's kind of about a large skyscraper that's owned by this very rich guy. I think he's meant to be a kind of a Mickey take of Donald Trump. And the skyscraper gets infested by gremlins, and Billy Peltz's girlfriend works in this skyscraper. She's like a tour guide, I seem to remember. And lots of hilarity ensue. And it's kind of takes Gremlins and just turns the volume up to 11, if you know what I mean. And Joe Dante goes crazy, and it's a very fun, frenetic movie. For me, I still prefer the first movie, but I know Gremlins 2 has a big following. And I think it's one of those movies that the more years that pass by, the more people love it. And, I'm happy to have it in my collection. And so the last movie is the newest Joe Dante movie that I've acquired. And I only saw it within the last few years. And it's a movie called Matinee with John Goodman. And I was aware of this movie when it first came out, but from the posters, from the little bit I'd read about it, I don't think it really appealed to me. But as I got older, I started to read up on it more and thought I'd give it a try. And I rented a digital copy of this movie and liked it so much I ended up buying the Blu-ray. And luckily, Arrow released a special edition version of it not long ago, and that was on sale, and I managed to pick up a copy quite cheaply. So of the Joe Dante movies that I have, this is the one that I know well the least, because I've only seen it fairly recently. But the premise is that John Goodman is like a filmmaker that comes into Key West in the early 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he is showing a movie called Mant, which is the last of like the 1950s atomic science fiction thrillers about a man that's turning into an ant. And, the movie is where he takes over the cinema in the town and to premiere this Mant. Alongside that, the Cuban Missile Crisis is happening. And there's 3 or 4 teenagers in the movie, that come and go with various love interests. And one of them is helping John Goodman, wire buzzers into the seats of the patrons. So when the shocks happen in the movie, they all get a shock in real life. And there's a lot of funny things that happen. And it kind of picks up, I would say, in like the last half an hour of the movie when the actual Mant showing takes place and all these crazy things start happening in the cinema. So it's a good film, not his best. I'd say of the ones I have, Matinee is probably the weakest, but I think the more I watch it, the more it will grow on me. And it definitely has that kind of vibe to it where you can imagine the meeting that Joe Dante had with Warner Brothers, and they must have agreed a kind of one for you, one for me deal, where Joe Dante must have said, well, I will do Gremlins 2 for you if you let me make this other picture that I want to make. And I'm sure that's what happened, because otherwise I wouldn't have thought a movie like that would have got a green light quite easily, because it's quite a niche subject. So they are the 5 Joe Dante movies that I have in my collection. I know that Joe Dante has done more after Matinee. One is the movie Small Soldiers, I think it's called. But I don't have any of his later movies. I tend to see that period between like 1984 to the early 90s is like Joe Dante's golden period. And the other thing that occurred to me fairly recently was the look of these movies is very unique. I always think there's certain directors where, you know, you can put on a movie and watch a scene, and just by the way the movie looks, you can kind of start to think that is a Steven Spielberg movie, or that is a Tim Burton movie. And Joe Dante is one of those directors, and I think a lot of that is down to the fact that he always works with the same. He always worked, should I say, because I believe he passed away fairly recently. He worked with a director of photography called John Hoare, and John Hoare just seemed to have a good eye. And from Gremlins right through to Matinee, that they all have a nice stylistic look to them. You know, lots of colourful lighting, and you know they just look like good movies. And I think that look merged really well with Joe Dante's kind of comic Looney Tunes visual aspect that he liked to inject into his films. So yeah, so there we go. So that's my Joe Dante collection. So if you've not seen any of these movies, then, you know, as always, I only talk about movies that I love, so I'm always going to recommend them. So there we go. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. I was hoping to hit 10 subscribers by Christmas, and as of me recording this video, I've actually now got 12. So thank you so much to the 12 of you out there that have subscribed, whoever you are. Feel free to comment below. One of the things that I'm looking forward to with this channel is the interaction and just hearing from people. You know, do they agree with what I think about some of these films, or disagree, or maybe you can recommend things that I've not seen yet. But yeah, you know, please leave a message and give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you managed to make it to this point in the video, then, you know, maybe give it a go. Subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, but I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay, right, I'm rambling on again like I always do. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.